Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Really happy to introduce Jennifer Holdley here for you. She had done one of our coffee and conversations in the past over Zoom, so it's really nice to actually see her in person. Is it possible? I've actually never seen, we've met in person. Definitely. Okay. So the Walpole Council on Aging is part of the Neponset Valley Alzheimer's Partnership, and I serve on the board with Jennifer. And it's a wonderful partnership in that we've put this program together for you today. So Jen is the regional manager for Southeastern Massachusetts for the Alzheimer's Association, and she's going to talk about all the wonderful resources and programs that they offer free of charge. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you all for coming today. My goal today is just to give you an overview of what the Alzheimer's Association does, some statistics surrounding the disease, and a quick glance at what are some of the warning signs to look for. I don't want to scare anybody when I go over that because we're all going to identify with some of it. So the key takeaway is it something that's big enough to interrupt and kind of interfere with your ability to live your daily life. So we'll go over what's kind of normal aging versus something to be concerned about or just talk with your doctor about it. It doesn't always mean that it's Alzheimer's disease. I'll start with that. There's a lot of other reasons that somebody might experience those symptoms, so that's important to know. So like Debbie said, I'm Jennifer Holdley. I'm with the Alzheimer's Association. I think I'm in my 10th year, or going on my 10th year. And prior to that, I worked in the assisted living world, running memory care units. And that was for about 10 years too. It's so weird to say that. It's like the years are really adding up. But I think, all of that experience helps me to be able to think of different scenarios and ideas and symptom management from the work that I've done. This is also something that's impacted my family. So that's kind of why I got into this in the first place. Both of my grandfathers had dementia. And I think looking back, it would have been good if we had known more about the Alzheimer's Association. So my main goal is to get out and let people know that we exist and what resources are available so that people don't have to go this alone. We were lucky enough with both sides of the family to have multiple family members that were able to pitch in. Some nurses were involved and in the family, so it was great to be able to have that. But not everybody has that. Some people are going it completely alone, and they don't have to. At least with the Alzheimer's Association, we're a resource that can help point you in the right direction for your needs. And everybody's needs are different, so that's important to know as well. So what worked for your neighbor might not work for your situation. So I'm just going to go ahead, and our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. So we are the Alzheimer's Association and other dementias. It's just too long of a title to put on brochures and whatnot, but we help people with any type of dementia. And we're going to get into a little bit about what those terms mean, but it's important to know that we can help people with any type of diagnosis or no diagnosis. If people are just concerned about some memory issues or they're not really sure what's going on, we can still be there as a resource. So these are the most up-to-date facts and figures that we have. We know that more than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. Oop, it's jumping ahead on me. And that on average, there's about 2 to 3 unpaid family or friends helping out with care. So these are just some facts and figures. I don't want to go into every detail of them, but it's a good kind of overview to show you the prevalence of the disease. And we know that every year we release our updated facts and figures, and every year the numbers go up. What we know, and the reason behind that, is that age is the #1 risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia. And with the baby boomer generation being one of our larger parts of our population, they're aging. And so we're seeing more and more people developing Alzheimer's or a different type of dementia. So this just gives us a better overview of how severe that is. And I will say, every time I do one of these programs, I'll ask people, do you know somebody that's been impacted by dementia? And almost every single person is saying yes. And obviously, sometimes people are drawn to these programs because of that. But sometimes I'll just do this as like a general program for a corporation, for like a lunch and learn or at a Rotary Club. Same thing happens. So it's very interesting. It's one of those diseases that we don't talk about much. We kind of shy away and hide it a little bit. We are getting better with that. But so many people are impacted by it. Why are we keeping it quiet? We should be talking about it because probably your neighbor knows somebody that's also dealing with this. Or, I think it's just important for us to open up those doors for discussion so people don't feel so alone. Sure.
When was Alzheimer's actually diagnosed as a disease?
Sure, yeah. So it's been about 100 years. And the question was, when did we first kind of discover Alzheimer's disease? There is a gentleman, a researcher named, I'm probably going to butcher his name, but Aloy, I think it was, Alzheimer was his last name. And he had a patient that was actually younger, that was developing these symptoms that he couldn't understand, this short-term memory loss and some behavior changes, and thinking was kind of foggy. And upon her death, they did an autopsy and discovered what we now know are these kind of hallmarks of the disease, the beta amyloid plaques and tangles in the brain. And it was named after him for discovering that, but that was about 100 years ago. So it's existed longer than that, but he was the first one to really kind of say what's going on here and put a name to it. Yeah, and over the course of the last 100 years, it's, hasn't been a huge amount of leaps and bounds in terms of treatment. We're getting there, though, and I will say more about that. There's some really exciting things in the pipeline. So our strategic goals as an organization are providing enhancing care and support, and I'm going to talk about each of these strategic goals in just a minute, but this gives you a good overview of what our organization does. We have our big walks to end Alzheimer's and other fundraisers that we do, and I'll go out into the crowd and chat with people and kind of talk about their story, what brought them there. And most people think that they're raising money just for research. That is a part of it, but we do a lot more. So I do like to let people know that. We do help to accelerate research and fund research, but we also want to increase concern and awareness through talks like this or media coverage, things like that, just to get the information out there to people that maybe have no idea what they're dealing with. Also, we work on increasing revenue through our walks and other fundraisers that then go to these other goals, like advancing public policy. We do a lot of work with our elected officials to talk to them, have people share their stories so that our elected officials get real time stories of people that are dealing with this, and they can understand why, if they vote a certain way on a law, that it makes a difference in somebody's life. Some of that also secures funding for us, so that's helpful too. We also provide an enhanced care and support, which I will get to in an upcoming slide, and strengthening diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think, there are underrepresented communities that are actually more at risk for developing Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. We know that Black African Americans are twice as likely to develop a dementia than Caucasians, and the Latinx community is 1.5 times more likely to develop. There's still a lot of research going on in terms of that, but what we do know is that often those communities have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, and there is a correlation for some people when they develop a dementia that there are cardiovascular links to that. So our cardiovascular health is really important. But we also want to be reaching these communities. Another part is that those communities are underrepresented in the research world as well. So trying to meet people where they're at, making it accessible for them to be able to take part in research and giving them the materials and the education they need about the research trials that are taking place so that they can opt to take part in that and be represented. So this, going on about research, this is just a more local slide about research taking place in Massachusetts. And we are really lucky to live in a very research-rich state. A lot of our hospitals and universities are doing a lot of great research. So we're very, very lucky for that. And we tend to get applications for people that are trying to secure funding for research, and that's decided upon as to what looks like it might have some progress in the future. So we do fund a lot of research, which is really helpful to keep the ball rolling in the right direction. And this is just in Massachusetts. We realize that it may be a collaborative effort worldwide. So we fund research all over the world as well. And we actually have a symposium that happens every year that is an international conference that we invite people to. It takes place in various places around the world each year, where we invite researchers to present about their research, compare notes. I mean, this could be where the cure is found. And we are starting to think that the cure might not be just one pill or one infusion or injection. It may be kind of a cocktail of things. So it may be a few different things. And just like any other medication or drug out there, everything works different for different people. So keeping that in mind as well. We do have a trial match program. So if you are interested in learning more about the research taking place and potentially getting involved, you can go to alz.org, which is our website, /trial match. If you add that /trial match, it'll take you right to our trial match page. And basically what you do is you fill out a questionnaire about yourself. And you would say, whatever the questions are, you answer. And then afterwards, it bounces back to you saying, here are some trials in the area that you've set the parameters for. And based on your answers, there's, maybe 6 trials that you sort of pre-qualify for. And then from there, it's totally up to you to take the next step. Nobody's contacting you. Your information isn't shared with any of the researchers. If all you want to do is read about the research, that can be where it stops. But it does provide a summary of the research, the different trials, and it'll also give you a contact so you can move ahead with taking part in a trial. And I will say they look for people, anybody and everybody. So based on your questions, it'll tell you what you pre-qualify for. It doesn't matter whether you have a diagnosis, whether you're concerned about your memory, or whether you're perfectly healthy. They look for everybody because the trials vary. Sometimes it's a sleep study. Sometimes it's a new medication or a new diagnostic tool. It could even just be an online questionnaire about being a caregiver. So it varies from person to person. I encourage everybody to check this out and just to learn about what research is taking place in our area. It's really exciting. And going toward more of our public policy end of things, we have the Alzheimer's Impact Movement. We have a few different approaches of how we talk to our elected officials and move the public policy needle. So one is at a national level. One thing we do is every year in the spring, we head to Washington, D.C., and people from all of our states across the nation will head to Washington, D.C. and basically paint the hill purple just by being there. Purple is our signature color, so people are wearing that, and they go in and talk to their elected officials and share their stories. And each year we have a new ask of what we're trying to accomplish. So we include them in that decision making and hope that they support us. And we do have a lot of people that support us, and we often, we also remind them that this is not something that matters what political affiliation you have. This impacts everybody. So if you look at, the different colors of the political affiliations, we have the red and the blue. If you mix those colors, you get purple. So I don't know that that was done on purpose, but it works. So we do try to meet everybody where they're at and let them know that this matters to all of their constituents, so that thinking about that is important. Another slide about people in the workplace. So some people who have dementia are still working. So how does that impact them? Keeping that in mind. When's the right time to stop working? And does that make sense for insurance and things like that? And can they continue with their job in a way that's effective? And for a while in the earlier stages, they may be able to do that depending on what line of work they're in. So that's important to have those conversations with your physician, as well as even an elder law attorney, getting them involved to make sure that you have checked off all the boxes to make sure that you're covered and you're legally okay. But also for caregivers. There are lots and lots of caregivers that are still working and trying to, that may be for insurance reasons, that may be for, just that's their career and they're not able to stop working. Some people do have to cut down their hours. They may have to take that family medical leave of absence. So it does impact the workplace. And this is just an important slide to show the impact that has, because it does take a toll on the workplace. And a lot of times people are having to retire early in order to be at home with their loved one. So important to, again, talk to the Alzheimer's Association, figuring out what resources you may be able to pull in so that you can effectively still work, or what makes the most sense in your situation. We also have a lot of people that are part of that sandwich generation that are caregivers. So they may be caring for a parent, but also raising kids and working. So they're kind of in that middle part there, trying to figure out how to be everything to everybody. So how can the Alzheimer's Association help? We have our 24/7 helpline, and if you, it jumped ahead again. If you leave with anything today, there's plenty of these helpline cards on the table. Please take some, even if you want to leave one with your hair salon or at your church or wherever it may be. It's important to have this on hand. We actually tell people to even just program the number into your phone. We are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and somebody will answer your call. I always tell people, even if you're not sure what you're calling for, if you don't actually have a question, it's okay. Just call and we figure that out with you. We'll just get you talking, get you started, and then we'll be able to point you in the right direction for resources. With this, we can also help to we have a database that basically you can say, I'm looking for a home care agency, or I'm looking for a diagnostic treatment center, or an elder law attorney, whatever it may be that you're looking for, we can pull up a list. We don't recommend one over another because what you like, you might not like, or you had a great experience, but maybe you didn't. What we do is we'll give you a list and then give you some consumer tips of things to look for and ask, questions to ask so that you are educated about that particular type of service and you kind of know what to expect. So that's really a helpful service. All of our programs and services are at no cost. We're able to do that because of our fundraising efforts. And so that's a huge part of what we do and why people are raising that money. That some of it goes to research, but a lot of it is about helping people that are dealing with this right now. Our goal is to find a cure or at least a disease-altering treatment, but we know that people need help right now. So the care and support end of things with our helpline is very helpful to people. We also know that sometimes you need more than just a list of, say, a diagnostic treatment center. You may need much more than that. So we do have something called a care consultation, and that's just a more in-depth look at your situation and figuring out a plan of action. So we might say, all right, Right now, in the next few weeks, we want you to look into these types of services so that you can come up for air, know that this part is covered and taken care of. And then from there, you want to start thinking about what you might need in the future. So the future is very different for every person, depending on what kind of resources you have available to you, who might be involved in that care, what your long-term goals are. So we work with whatever you're looking to do. Some people want to keep their loved one at home for the duration of the disease. You can do that if the right things are put in place so that everybody involved is safe. That's our number one goal. If it doesn't make sense, maybe based on, the setup of the home or how involved people can be, then we're going to say, all right, let's look at some of those services that are outside of your home that we can look at and make the most sense for your situation. We also have free education programs. So we have programs that are specific to people living with dementia, as well as caregivers, and just general audience programs as well. So some of it, like a program that might be nice for a caregiver, is one all about effective communication strategies. We have one that's more of a general audience type of program that's about the warning signs, things to look for, or just understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. And then we do have some that are specific to the person living with dementia as well. We also have support groups, which are really a big thing for people. They need it. I think, even if we think we don't need support, I've actually started calling them resource sharing and support groups, because that's what a lot of it is just sharing resources, tips and tricks of things that have worked, things that maybe didn't work, and asking for advice from the group. This is a new thing we're dealing with. How have you handled that? So it's important to be able to share stories and kind of swap ideas, and that's very helpful. It does help in terms of support, just because you do feel like these people in the room with me or online, because we have them both, they get it in a way that maybe, your well-meaning friend doesn't get it. If they haven't lived through it themselves, they don't always have the idea of what that actually means to be a caregiver to somebody who has dementia. So the support groups can be a lifesaver for people. And like I said, we have them in person, but we also have them online. So whatever's most convenient for people, that can be great. And we also have our community resource finder. That is actually the database that we use when somebody calls our helpline or needs to get connected to a resource. It keeps kind of everything that we do in one place, but people can access that on their own. It can get a little tricky to hone in on the exact thing that you're looking for. And if you're not really sure what you're looking for, call the helpline. That's the best way to start. We can get you pointed in the right direction. So this is just another slide that talks about our free online and in-person education programs and support groups. Your best bet is to either call the helpline to start, or you can go to alz.org and you can search all of our stuff there. alz.org can be a little overwhelming, though, I will say that. There's a lot of information, so if that's the route you want to take, set aside plenty of time to sift through it all. But if you're looking for something very specific, a good idea is just to call the helpline, and then we can send you the link directly or mail out a paper copy of something if that's what you'd prefer. Okay, so you've heard me use the terms Alzheimer's and you've heard dementia. I'm going to go into what is the difference. So dementia is this umbrella term that really just means a decline in cognitive functioning that's going to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. It's not really a diagnosis. It's just saying, here are the symptoms somebody's experiencing. So what we encourage people to do is push for a more of a diagnosis than just, oh, you have dementia, because it does matter what you're dealing with and how you might approach the treatment. So listed on the right-hand side here are some types of dementia. Alzheimer's tends to be the most common reason why somebody's experiencing that decline in cognitive functioning, but it's not the only reason. There's also a vascular type dementia, Lewy body, frontotemporal, others including Huntington's disease, or a mixed dementia, just meaning you have more than one. There's also other reasons why somebody might experience a decline in cognitive functioning that has nothing to do with any of those. Maybe you start a new medication and you're getting some brain fog from that, and things just aren't connecting right in your mind. It could be a urinary tract infection or any other type of infection that can impact your thinking. Sometimes it could be a thyroid issue that's not being managed properly. If your thyroid levels are off, that can give you that brain fog. So it's important for you to find out what's going on and not assume that it is Alzheimer's or one of these other types of dementias, because it could be something that could be reversed. And I tell people that because initially the first thing you need to do, just like any other potential health problem that you have, get to your doctor, find out what's going on. If they run all these tests and find out, yeah, no, the thyroid's good, no infection, haven't started any new medication, all of this looks good, then you want to push for the next step. All right, let's find out what might be happening here. What are these brain changes from? And that's important that you push for that. And if you feel like something's happening and you're not getting the answers that you want, ask for a referral. Ask for seeing a full diagnostic workup or a neurologist or whatever it may be. But you want to push. You don't want to just say, okay, I'll see you in 6 months or a year. It's important to be heard by your physicians and make sure that you are an advocate for yourself or your loved one. A lot of times somebody who has dementia, depends on the person and how it's going in their development of the dementia. But for some people, there is not an awareness that there are changes that are happening. And for other people, there is an awareness. It just varies person to person. We always say if you've met one person with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, you've really just met one person with dementia. That's it. Because every person, it's going to impact in a different way. Also, people may develop Alzheimer's disease or a dementia and get the diagnosis. They may know that they have the diagnosis, but not really relate that to what that means. For example, I used to, like I said, I worked in an assisted living. We took care of this woman that she knew that her diagnosis was Alzheimer's disease. For her, it would mean, we would be doing a trivia or, some other activity where she was trying to think of an answer and she'd go, oh, I can't get it. That's my Alzheimer's disease. So she knew and she recognized that she was going to forget things or might struggle with her thinking a little bit. But that was kind of where her understanding of it stopped. For her, she couldn't understand why she couldn't live alone anymore or go driving. Might need some extra help with medications and keeping track of things, and that it is going to progress. So for her, that was kind of just her own understanding, was she was going to forget stuff. That was about it. So it just varies person to person on what that title means. For other people, they never get a diagnosis for whatever reason. Maybe they just don't have the support around them to get them to a doctor. Maybe they refuse it. So it's at that point, it matters to the people around them to try to help get them the support they need. It doesn't always matter about necessarily having the diagnosis. It's helpful if you do know what you're dealing with so that you can approach it in the best way possible. But if they outright refuse and won't go to the doctor, well, we need to support you anyway. And so that's another call to the Alzheimer's Association helpline. That's going to help you to figure out what support things you need to put in place. All right, so now we're going to go into these warning signs, these scary warning signs that we're all probably going to go, oh my goodness, and I don't want you to leave before I finish this, or if you do, take one of the brochures because I don't want you to worry. Like I said, it doesn't always mean that it is Alzheimer's disease. So some of these symptoms that people may experience might be something else. So if anything, all it means is you should talk to your doctor if you're concerned. Often doctors now, just as part of your regular checkup, will ask you, they'll tell you maybe 3 words when you walk in the door, and then when you leave, right before you leave, what were those 3 words? They just want to kind of get a sense for what's your baseline at. There may be more questions to kind of figure out what your cognition is at so that they know next time when you come in, yep, she did great answering those questions. And maybe next time you have a lot of trouble remembering those 3 words. That seems different, so they can compare it. There could be a lot of reasons why you don't remember those 3 words, though. Maybe you are rattled because you're having a very stressful day that day, and those 3 words are just not at the forefront of your brain. So that's okay. But I do think it's important to know what are these warning signs and what's normal aging versus something to be maybe a little concerned about, and talk to your doctor. So first is memory loss that disrupts your daily life. Something that's normal would be forgetting something, but then recalling it later. So we all do that. What's today's date? What's the day of the week? Happens to me all the time. I know where to look, or I can think about it and figure it out. Somebody who has dementia is not going to be able to do that as well, or if at all, and it's going to disrupt their daily life. Next is challenges in planning and problem solving. Something that's normal aging might be that you make an occasional error when you're balancing your checkbook. But you can then go back and go, all right, where did I go wrong with my math? What did I forget, to put in there? And then figure out how to make it right again. Somebody who has dementia, they're not going to be able to do that. They may, see that there's a light bulb out, say, well, that light bulb's out, I need to change that, but not be able to go through all of the steps that it takes to get that new light bulb, figure out where do you keep the light bulbs, and replace it. And it sounds like a simple task, but there are a lot of steps to make it happen. So that's something to consider as well. Difficulty completing familiar tasks. So something that might be considered normal aging would be, on occasion, you might need help with, programming your microwave or a new remote control that you got for the television. All the new technology throws us off, and it seems like they always come out with the next best thing. So you have to relearn it every time, and it may take a little time to figure that out. But somebody who has dementia, it may be something that they have always done, but now they're just at a loss to, going through those steps and figuring out how to complete that familiar task. Another is confusion with time or place. Again, you may forget the day of the week or the time of day, things like that, but you know where to look and figure that out. Somebody who has dementia, they may kind of lose what season it is or passages of time. They may actually go back in time a little bit to a different time period in their life. I almost think of it as when we look at a bookshelf that is all of the chapters of our life, and you start with the more recent chapters, pulling the books off, and it goes back in time to the earlier chapters of our life. A lot of the reason for that is that there's a part of our brain called the hippocampus, and that part of our brain is kind of in charge of new information comes in, and it decides where in the brain it's going to be stored as memory. And that part of the brain is one of the earlier parts that is impacted by Alzheimer's disease, so that when somebody is taking in new information, it never gets stored as memory. And that's why oftentimes somebody who has Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia, that short-term memory loss is one of the first things that we tend to notice. They may ask the same question over and over or tell the same story, or they may even go back to a different time period in their life. And often that can be something that you can utilize when you're communicating. You may decide, okay, I'm not going to talk to them about, this recent event. I'm going to talk about the good old days because that was stored as memory. So if you talk to them about things from a long time ago, they're probably going to be able to engage in that conversation more so than something that is current. So that's just a little tip for communication. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Something that's normal might be that we might have vision changes related to cataracts, but this is different. Often contrast of color or depth perception is impacted. You may even see people walk a little differently because they may be a little worried about, is that dark tile a hole in the ground? Is it very shiny and it looks wet to me? So just processing what they're seeing can become difficult. As well as sometimes the peripheral vision is impacted. And you can think about what impact that might have safety-wise, like if somebody's still driving and the signage around them, how close are they to the car in front of them, those types of things to consider. new problems with words in speaking or writing. How many of us have ever said, oh, what's that word I'm thinking of? I can't get it. It happens to us all, and that's normal. We can it'll come to us, or we think of a different word that can help us to get our point across. That's not such a big deal, but somebody who has dementia, it may be a full stop where I can't move on in the conversation because they get hung up on that. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. I misplace things from time to time. I'm sure we all do. The important part of this is the last part of that statement, is that ability to retrace your steps. That's where the concern lies. It lies if you don't have that ability to retrace your steps because that short-term memory has been impacted. That's a concern. So people who just may misplace things from time to time, not a big deal if you can go, all right, where's the last time I saw it, and backtrack. Often what will happen though is when somebody has dementia, if they misplace things and they don't recall where they put it, they may start to try to make sense of what's going on around them by saying somebody must have moved it or somebody stole it. And that can get kind of upsetting for the caregiver or the people around them because they didn't do anything wrong. They don't know where the person put it, but they're being accused of doing something to it. So that can be upsetting. Decreased or poor judgment is another. Something that may be considered normal aging might be that we just make a bad decision from time to time. And, it might be like, I took too long to change the oil in my car or something along those lines. But somebody who has dementia, it's going to be bigger than that. Sometimes it's giving away a lot of money to telemarketers or the scam artists that are out there. And those scam artists are getting good. They're not good, they're terrible, but they are getting very crafty about how they approach things. So I think, sometimes they fall victim to that. Also, it could be about how we dress for the season, which is always a challenge in New England anyway, because we could have like winter in the morning and summer in the afternoon. But, if you see somebody walking in a t-shirt and shorts or a nightgown and it's a blizzard out, not good decision making. That judgment is not there. Another is withdrawal from work or social activities. Something that's normal might be that, sometimes we might just grow uninterested in some obligations, social obligations that we may have. We may be like, I don't feel like going out. It's not a nice day out, but thank you all for being here. And those things come into play. So that's normal aging. But often somebody who has dementia, they may withdraw for a couple of reasons. One might be that they don't remember that they're supposed to be at a certain place and time. Or it may be more of a defense mechanism where, okay, if I withdraw, nobody's going to really find out that something's going on. I won't make that mistake of, repeating the story over and over again in front of people. So sometimes it's a way of masking what's going on. And then the last one is changes in mood or personality. We all develop our way of doing things, and sometimes if that gets interrupted, we might get a little irritated if that routine is interrupted. But this is more drastic, the mood or personality change, where this is kind of like you're dealing with somebody totally different. And it varies from person to person. Sometimes it's very obvious, and sometimes it's like little by little. So it just depends on each individual. But if you are seeing any of these changes, either in yourself or somebody that you love, it's worth talking about it and figuring out what it might be. It, again, doesn't mean that it's Alzheimer's disease. It could be something else. And sometimes it's something that could be fixed very easily. So don't delay the time that it takes to get to your doctor, because if it's something like, an infection that you can get on an antibiotic and in a week's time feel right back to your normal self, that's time that you wasted. And then there's sometimes things that are life-threatening. Like it could be something going on. We had a gentleman that actually took part in that trial match program. He was perfectly healthy, had no symptoms, didn't know anything was going on, but he actually had a brain scan just to be part of a thing, and he found out he had a brain tumor. was able to be operated on because they caught it early, and he's fine. But sometimes brain changes can be happening because of something like that, and it can be taken care of and get somebody back to their a good health place. So don't assume that it's Alzheimer's disease. Get that conversation going with a physician and then go from there. If it is Alzheimer's disease, there's help. We can help people that are dealing with this to have it. It's not going to be easy, I'm not going to lie, but it doesn't have to be as hard as it is if you're going at it alone. So I think it's important to have that conversation early so that you can make plans, and especially for the person who's living with dementia, they can take part in what they want to see happen if that discussion is had early on. If you wait, then if it's a progressive type of disease that's causing the dementia, then they may not be able to participate for very long. And especially with the legal and financial type of things, you want them to be able to, under their own will, be able to sign off on things and make decisions and say, here's what I want to see happen. So very important to have those discussions early.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes, take care.
He's had all those symptoms for about the last year or so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I hope you call our helpline if you haven't already.
He was diagnosed about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. So healthy behaviors for your brain, there are things we can do to reduce our risk. There are things that are beyond our control. I said earlier that age is the #1 risk factor. However, we can't change that, but how we age can be something that we can control. So things like eating healthy. I mentioned earlier that cardiovascular health is really important to maintaining a healthy brain. So eating healthy, sleeping well, figuring out what's that sweet spot of the amount of time you need for sleep, and that varies person to person. Some people need like 10 hours to be up at their optimum brain health. Other people need 5. So it just very much depends. So you want to figure out what makes sense for you and try to have the same sleep-wake cycle. So go to bed at the same time every night, get up at the same time every morning, even if you don't have to. Set a schedule, because that circadian rhythm is important for maintaining your brain health. Get moving. So if you don't already get some sort of activity in your life that gets your heart pumping, that's important, because with every beat of our heart, blood flow is going to our brain. So if we can make that the most nourishing as possible, that's going to be helpful. And check in with your physician to make sure all of these things are at your level of fitness and all of that, but you want to be taking care of that as much as you can. What's good for our heart is good for our brain. Protect your head. Any sort of physical activity, if you're riding a bike or skiing, wear a helmet. That's really important. They do know that concussions, even early on in life, do have an impact on our brain health. So if you've had concussions in your life, that's something to consider, that your brain health is at risk. So when we can protect our heads, that's important. Taking care of your heart again. If you smoke, you shouldn't. I'm sure you already know that, but quit. You should do it. There's a lot of smoking cessation groups out there that can be really helpful. So I think that, just knowing that it's good for your brain to quit smoking, think about that, because it does impact your heart health. And if the heart and the brain are connected, that makes a difference. So join us. Lots of ways that you can get involved, whether it's just calling our helpline and utilizing our programs and services. You can attend support groups. You can get involved in our fundraising efforts. As a team, you can get, a faith-based organization that you're a part of. We come out and we'll talk to anybody that will listen. So definitely, if you're interested and you want to have us come out and talk to your book club or your faith-based organization or your Rotary Club or whatever you're involved in, we will do that. If you want to get my information from Debbie, she can definitely pass that along. Or you can just call the helpline and ask to get connected to somebody that can service your area. We have people all across the country, and we try to keep things uniform. So the program that you may see here in Massachusetts, if you have a relative in, say, Arizona, they're going to see the same program. and get the same information. They can call the helpline and also talk to people. The database that gets pulled up for their zip code may be different, but they may be caring for somebody that lives across the country. So they could say, my loved one lives in Massachusetts, can you get me the information for all of that? So that can be really helpful. And as an individual, lots of ways you can get involved. One would be sharing your story. If you're somebody that's been impacted by dementia, sharing that, either just in conversation with other people. You could share it with the Alzheimer's Association if you don't mind sharing it out to the world. We often do media pitches so that other people can hear, and we normalize talking about it because nobody should feel alone in this. For other diseases, like a long time ago, people didn't talk about cancer. It still happens, so we need to talk about these things so that we can understand each other, share resources, and not feel so isolated, because it is an isolating disease. With Alzheimer's disease, I think people don't want to talk about it. But it's okay. Nobody did anything wrong. It just, it happens. So I think it's important to discuss. Getting involved in the clinical trials, again, starting a fundraising team. We have a lot of different things that in the next slide that I'll talk about regarding that. You can also share your stories with elected officials, or help your neighbors by hosting an education program or a support group. You can also get involved as a volunteer to get trained to offer education programs or be a support group facilitator. So again, that's a great call to our helpline to kind of get figured out as to where you fit in and what opportunities are available for you. And then ways to get involved. We have our Walk to End Alzheimer's is our biggest fundraiser. And again, that helps us to fund research and our care and support, and also our advocacy efforts as well. The Longest Day is another activity that we have that takes place in June, and people do whatever they want to do. We have teams that have a fishing tournament or a golf tournament or cornhole tournaments. We have people that do a bake-off. We have people that, kids that will do lemonade stands, lots of different things that you can get involved in or start your own type of activity. So that's another way to get involved and give back. So you can go to alz.org or www.act.alz.org. So again, probably your best bet is just go to alz.org, and then you can find the right things to click on that make sense for what you're looking for, or just call our helpline, and that's 800-272-3900. So with that, I want to say thank you for coming today. And I can take any questions. Does anybody have any questions about either something I did talk about that you want me to elaborate on, or something that I didn't discuss that you'd like to learn more about? I'll do my best to answer.
How have they found the different medications that are out there, Prevagen and different things? How is the outcome? Is it helping, or is it just stabilizing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question's about medications that are out there. So currently, there's some really exciting research trials taking place that we're hoping by the end of November, we're going to have more information about the data on the particular type of medication that's in the pipeline right now. This is a newer type of medication. It's really exciting because it actually would change the pathology of the disease. Up until now, it's only been about treating the symptoms. So, there are some medications out there that kind of lift the brain fog a little bit, but it doesn't stop the progression of the disease. It doesn't change how it's moving around in the brain. This medication would help with that. So whether that buys somebody time, it may not be a cure for the disease, but it seems like a disease-altering treatment anyway. So we're excited to hear that that's in the pipeline. We are also cautiously optimistic because there have been other drugs in the pipeline that we thought were going to be, a great answer, and it didn't turn out that way. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, and we're going to learn more probably by the end of November. Any other questions? Yes.
So my outlook's a little bit skewed because I work in an assisted living, just as you did. But I found it interesting when you were talking about the things you can do to keep yourself at the top of your game. socialization wasn't on there.
Yeah, so that actually is a huge one. They just condensed down. We actually have, so the question was about things that you can do to minimize your risk, and that socialization was not on that slide. We actually have a whole program that's called Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body, and socialization is in there. That is a huge piece, because we saw over the pandemic when everybody was in lockdown, that isolation. Actually, we are looking at numbers now, and it did increase the cases of people developing dementia. Isolation is one of the worst things we can do for our brain. There's not a huge amount of available research about socialization. You and I know, working in the field, that it has an impact, but there's not like solid information. There is a study being done, though, that takes in some of these things that we see almost as anecdotal, and they are looking at that. So like a prescribed exercise program, prescribed healthy eating, and the socialization part. So hopefully we'll learn more that we can solidly say, yes, this research backs that up. Right now, the research isn't huge, but we do know that socialization is a huge part. Our brains require a lot of firing and things happening in there in order just to have a conversation with people. So the fact that you are here today, good, because that's a good step. To hopefully afterwards you'll mill around, have some coffee, and socialize a little bit, but also continuing your learning. Challenging your brain in lots of different ways is another piece that we know that is important for our brains. So definitely keep that going. Any other questions or thoughts? Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I don't know if you said that Alzheimer's is considered to be genetic, or?
Yeah, so I didn't talk about the genetic component. So there is some genetic component to developing Alzheimer's, but it's, so for me, I mentioned before that this is something that's impacted my family. Both sides, knowing that, it puts me more at risk. Just like if heart disease ran in my family or high blood pressure, it puts me more at risk. But it doesn't mean I will develop it. There's a very small percentage of people that develop Alzheimer's disease that have a particular gene that you can actually test for and say you will develop Alzheimer's disease even before symptoms. So, but typically, that's in families where, like for example, we work with a family that I think 6 of the 7 siblings developed Alzheimer's disease. So it's in your face. Something's happening here, where there's multiple members of the same family that develop it. For some people, and typically that comes on at a younger age. When we hear of younger onset or early onset, that is typically somebody who's 65 or younger. So you're kind of average normal, and it's not average or normal, but the Alzheimer's disease we typically see tends to happen after the age of 65. It's less rare to see that anyway. And that's not necessarily, somebody that has that deterministic gene. But like I said, it just depends on your family history. Some of it too is, for many, many years, we didn't know about Alzheimer's disease, or it wasn't documented in cause of death. People argue over this a lot. Is Alzheimer's disease fatal? Yes, it is. Because the brain is the control center of our body, and as the cell death in our brain occurs, that can cause somebody to die because of that. Our brains control our heartbeat, our blood pressure, all of these things that we don't have to necessarily even think about is controlled by the brain. So if that impacts the brain, it is considered a fatal disease.
Is this true or false, that you can't actually find out that it's Alzheimer's until there's an autopsy?
Yeah. So the question's about if you can find out if somebody has Alzheimer's disease without an autopsy. So it used to be that you had to have the autopsy to confirm. Now the tests are really good and they can figure out what's going on. Yeah. And they're actually, it's really exciting. The research world really is exciting. They're even looking at potentially a blood test down the line. So that would be huge to determine, you know, you don't have to go through a whole brain scan and things like that. You can just find out that way.
Well, it's on the same idea as CTE.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The football players that get head and
Yeah. Yeah.
wow. It's exciting to know that there's progress.
Yeah. I think, you know, a lot more needs to be done. And again, I think that starts with all of us talking about it more. You know, letting the world know, yes, we're interested in moving this forward and finding a cure or at least a disease-altering treatment. It can be devastating for people to have this in their lives. So the more we talk about it, the more we can see a change happen. So I will stop here. If you have any questions, you can come up and chat with me afterwards. But thank you so much for coming today, and enjoy the coffee.